Strong female characters. This has been a topic of conversation throughout different entertainment media during these past years. Many people complaining about the uprising of self-declared strong female characters in movies, TV shows, and even video games, who happen to have unrelatable and unlikable traits for the sake of selling a product to its viewers. However, even though I have my own thoughts regarding this topic, I do have to agree in certain extent because, from my personal experience, I did grow with strong female figures throughout my life. And I'm not talking about media specifically, but my personal life. And having such interactions from my childhood to my adulthood, I was not able to find any of these characters remotely relatable to these figures that have been so influential in me as mentors, friends, or relatives. So even though it is quite easy to complain about an issue without truly finding a solution to the problem, I can't say for certain that I can provide a feasible solution to this. What I can do, however, is provide you with my knowledge, experience and studies for when it comes to writing female characters. You see, I am a licensed playwright, and if there's anything that I learned after reading, watching and writing characters, and I don't say this for the sake of creating a sense of sounding relatable to anyone, is that female characters, most of the time, have the most interesting characters to be played, to the point where I wished I could play any of them for how colorful and diverse they are. From the dramatic turn of events from Othello to the comedic timing of The Importance of Being Earnest, just to name a few. When it comes to creating a character in a story, regardless of gender, ethnicity, religion, you name it, there's a couple of factors to keep in mind: background, personality, motivation, and the role in the story. I'm going to dissect them in this video, so please stay with me because I think it's going to be worth of your time. When it comes to creating a theater character, there's many influences from many writers throughout history to take inspiration from. Tennessee Williams, Anton Chekhov, Konstantin Stanislavski, Oscar Wilde, Henrik Ibsen, Alice Gretzenberg, Eddie Krila, Sophie Threadwell, and why not, even William Shakespeare. And I'm not going to mention all the tools provided by all of these authors, as the style of each one may come into conflict for a final result. So instead, I'm just going to grab one of them whose methodology explains this concept perfectly, and that is Anton Chekhov. Chekhov developed the theater tool most commonly known as the Chekhov gun, which states that if a gun is presented in the first act of the play, the same gun will have relevance in the story for Act 2, 3, or 4. With this, it is implicit to say that no element from the story is told by chance, as it will have a significant impact on the story. While this concept may be referring to items or plot elements specifically, this can also be applied to personality traits as well. Here, we see a connection between all the major factors in the story. Let's put it as an example with a theater play that executes this idea to perfection. Tape, which had a movie adaptation starring Ethan Hawke, Uma Thurman and Robert Sean Leonard. And bear with me, it's going to be a long explanation, but it's going to be worth it. The play starts with Ethan Hawke's character, Vincent, in an empty apartment. He drinks beers and pours some of the liquid on the drain while also smoking and filling the room with cigarette smell and cans all over the place. He is in a hurry, rushing to get everything ready. He is expecting someone, but he is trying to make sure that everything meets the expectations he tries desperately to impose on the upcoming characters. When the second character appears, John, portrayed by Robert Sean Leonard, we can see that these two characters know each other from a very long time ago. Here, we see how John is a professional documentary filmmaker with a down-to-earth attitude, while Vincent is a drug dealer and a volunteer firefighter with an erratic and electrifying attitude. In just the first minutes of the first act, we have established all the elements I have mentioned before: background, personality, motivation, and role, right? Well, sort of. We do have background and personality for these two characters, but what about the motivation and role? You could say that the roles are already defined by the profession, but that's not what role means in this context. It is meant to represent the role on the story. Vincent is Force 1 and John is Force 2. These two need to collide in order for a conflict to happen and a story to be told. So with that said, what about the motivation? We actually need to see this as the play continues, and we get a glimpse of this when Vincent thanks John for coming. That means that Vincent wanted John to visit him, but for what reason? This is where the main concept of the play takes priority, the conflict. But before we continue, what does this have to do with strong female characters? Bear with me as I said, because it will make sense as we proceed with the story. Turns out that the reason that Vincent invited John is because something happened a long time ago. Vincent was in love with Amy, a high school girl that he had a crush on, and during a party, John took advantage of her. You know what I mean by this. I can't say the word because otherwise YouTube would censor it, but you get the idea. Thus, Vincent wants John to confess that he did it, while also not telling him two things. One, that he was hiding a tape recorder in the room that was recording his confession, and two, that Amy was on her way to where they are at now. Remember when I mentioned that Vincent was trying to look disorganized, dirty and drunk? That was to lower John's guard and to make himself look much more approachable or not serious enough for him to remember what they were talking about. By looking drunk, high and intoxicated, John would have thought that Vincent would not be able to remember anything they talk while he is there, but Vincent managed to trick him into confessing what happened. John ends up confessing, and Vincent has his recording ready to show to Amy. These two forces have already collided, and the conflict begins. As Amy, portrayed by Thurman, enters the room, the situation feels odd, awkward and tense. There's a story between the three of them, but the conversation doesn't flow naturally. Now we have a new force in the room, a third one. You would think that the situation would be Force 1, that being Vincent, and Force 3, that being Amy, against Force 2, which would be John. And when Vincent tells Amy that he had a confession from John, the conflict should have been resolved and that would be it. Correct? Well, in simple terms, yes. But that would mean the end of the play and Amy's character would have been a simple closure to the story. But this is not what happens. Instead, we get a new turn of events. Amy says that the abuse never happened, that it was consensual. Thus, a new conflict emerges. Vincent refuses to believe Amy's story, and John tries to seek forgiveness and understanding from Amy, reiterating what happened over and over again. Amy, on the other hand, simply claims that John and her had a passionate night and nothing more. Here, we see how forces 1 and 3 split and now becomes a conflict between forces 1 and 2 against 3. Remember that conflict does not necessarily mean a fight or a struggle, but rather two opposing views preventing the forces from achieving an objective. With this in mind, it begs the question, which one of these forces is telling the truth? It turns out that at the end of the play, it is revealed that John has indeed taken advantage of Amy and that she did everything within her power to overcome that traumatic event. She moved on, only to be brought back to that situation against her will. But if that's the case, then why is she against Vincent? Isn't Vincent helping her bring in a closure to her story? And that's the point of discussion of this play. Amy had a closure already and moved on with her life. She did not ask for help nor wanted to talk about it any longer. Just like she was physically used in the past by John, she was now being emotionally and mentally used by Vincent out of whim. Had it been another woman, would Vincent have done the same? Did he do it because it was the right thing and to get justice for Amy? Or was it a jealousy act because he craved Amy rather than humanizing her? I understand that it sends the wrong message at first glance by stating, "Stay silent if this happens to you," but that is not the objective of the play. It's supposed to tell a story, one where the characters act and react in this scenario. All of them have flaws, and even the victim could have had a better approach, but it ends up with both Vincent and John feeling like idiots for what happened. Vincent realizing he did all of this for nothing, and John never getting the forgiveness that he craved for. Amy had her revenge in a purely mental way, and the story finally came to a conclusion, but in her own terms. It's all about the subtext, the message between lines, and not what is said explicitly. Her resilience for this traumatic event proved that a vulnerable woman had an incredible development motivated by pain and suffering, turning her into the person she is today. Not a perfect one, mind you, but the one she decided to be. And that's the interesting part of the strong female character: development. This is just one approach on how to create a relatable character, not one where she takes mandatory storytelling of the hero uprising and overcoming a conflict, but one that becomes self-aware of herself and does everything she can to surpass this situation. But then, what does this have to do with media in general? Well, it is necessary to reiterate concepts set by many other YouTubers regarding this problem. Many of modern female strong characters do not have any conflict to resolve other than men. And even though misogyny and sexism is an issue existing to this day, the overwhelming amount of stories resulting in the same outcome every single time starts the discussion of only sexism being the factor that prevents any woman from achieving anything, but never about the character questioning their own actions or thinking if what they're doing is right or not. I've got two perfect examples of actually strong female characters that show contrast in different ways of telling a story. Yuna from Final Fantasy X and Senua from Hellblade. Both of them have oppressive male figures in their lives. Yuna has Simo Guado as a manipulative and inconsiderate villain, and Senua has her father who ostracized her for her mental disease, calling her a witch. In the case of Yuna, we see her being supported by a group of guardians consisting of many races, genders, age groups, and even beliefs. She still faces a tyrant that forces her into marrying him for the sole purpose of getting power, but the same way she has a negative male figure in her journey, she also has positive ones. But that still doesn't stop Yuna from having negative thoughts throughout her journey. She wants to protect the people she cares about. She feels inefficient most of the time and is not afraid to show weakness. She is a strong summoner with the role of saving the world, but she cries, suffers, and keeps herself silent most of the time, not because she is forced to, but because she doesn't want anyone to bear her emotional weight. During her journey, she doesn't just rely on her guardians to do the job for her, but also tries to cheer them up, confront them, and push them forward, while also allowing herself to be vulnerable around them. Same thing can be said about Senua, a character that has known nothing but suffering her entire life, a father figure who'd only drown her psyche to a bottom low until she met Dylan. Again, we get the example of an oppressive male figure contrasted by a positive one. While one makes her feel like a monster that should have never existed in this world to begin with, the other one brings her peace and emotional balance. Senua's story is about how Dylan was killed by Vikings and how she tries to go to a place where he can be revived while also being haunted by the monsters and memories inside of her head. Yes, even though her father figure is the main reason Senua has so many issues with her self-confidence, her own mind is her main enemy, and she is seen as vulnerable, broken, and even defeated most of the story, but she keeps on going even if it only gets darker, harder, and worse for her. When Senua reaches her final destination, she realizes that she cannot revive Dylan at all, and thus her journey was not about going back in time to fix what happened, but to finish her mourn and to move on by herself. It's a touching story because if you have ever mourned the death of a loved one, you know how difficult it is to let go and continue with your own journey. So here, we have seen two examples of characters who can easily be considered strong female characters without the need of men being the sole purpose or obstacle of their journey. And it's easy to say that the only reason I chose these two characters is because there's male counterparts just to ease the audience and not to attack men directly. And because of that, I chose a third character in video games that destroy this last concept and is one of the pioneers for female characters in video games. Samus Aran from the Metroid series. Metroid has a very extensive lore that would need an entire essay on its own to be explained, but I'll stick to the first game to illustrate my point. When you start the game, your only objective is to face the aliens that are attacking you, get power-ups, get stronger, and defeat the boss. Easy, simple, effective. You need to overcome obstacles and become stronger as the game progresses. And the incredible thing about this game is that you don't know that your character is female until you finish the game. It did not have to go overboard over the fact that you were playing as a woman. It simply normalized it and surprised players in a simple and yet effective way. You ended up relating to a character not knowing if he was a male or female. Perfect example of good representation without being forced. Also, I am not looking at this game with nostalgia goggles because I never grew up with Metroid. It is an example of an analysis done with very good research on games throughout history. But moving from video games to another type of media, I would like to talk about another example of an interesting female character that faces a lot of issues during her journey in a manga that I just started reading after a long time. Berserk. And this character is Casca. This black female character faces a lot of modern issues that modern media fails to portray: sexism, abuse, elitism, and tragedy. Her role in the story isn't just as a simple background character, but rather a contrast between two other characters, Griffith and Guts. Casca is seen throughout her journey as someone who has experienced tragedy after tragedy, constantly being let down by everyone around her. She is disciplined, has short temper, fights alongside men, but also is not afraid to simply be herself. She can be vulnerable, silly, erratic, but also compassionate, kind, thoughtful, and lovely. She has experienced horrible things in the past, but that does not stop her from becoming the person she wants to be. We see her insecurities, obstacles, and battles throughout the story, and even though I am nothing like her in any aspect whatsoever, I relate to her character, I care about her, and I want her to do better. I am not up to date with the story yet, but I found a character that shows you where she started and where she is going, making me want to see both her tragedies and her glorious moments. In my personal life, I have been instructed, guided, and mentored by a lot of different women in my life. Some were soft, others were encouraging, others were extroverted, and others were introverted, from all ages, religions, ethnicities, personalities, you name it. And it's hard for me to understand how modern media tries to depict strong female characters as toxic, unfriendly, strong from the get-go, and no development whatsoever in general. I feel like this is a terrible example for young women because it shows that the only way to be strong and independent as they promote is to be rude and unfriendly, as if it were the only way to be the best version of yourself. What about women who are shy? What about the women that are extroverted, friendly, housewives, widows, mothers and grandmothers, childhood friends, depressed teenagers? Is it really the rude woman the only possible objective for any woman to ever aspire to? Is this the best you can actually do as a woman? My main concern with media nowadays isn't getting triggered by the way they keep portraying men as the source of all evil, but rather the lack of development tools for women out there who feel lost, who struggle with mental health, who don't know how to overcome difficult situations. It's like their message was, you don't need to be better, you're incredible just the way you are, instead of showing a relatable character that may go through the same thing as them. I don't hate strong female characters. What I hate is self-proclaimed strong female characters, which is a completely different thing. Just like Tywin Lannister said in Game of Thrones, any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king. Take the word man and change it for woman, and change king for strong. You don't get to choose the title of strong. You earn it. You are given the title. This is Plano, and thank you for watching.